Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are tackling something we use every single second of every day, but most of us don't really think about it. Electricity. We're going to demystify that invisible force that, let's be honest, runs our entire modern world. I mean, really think about it. You flick a tiny plastic switch and boom, light. That simple little action unleashes an invisible storm of energy, all governed by some really fundamental laws of physics. So let's follow that storm from the tiniest particles to the massive power grid and really understand the forces at your fingertips. To get our heads around this, we first need to figure out what is actually moving through those wires in your walls. And it all boils down to three core ideas: charge, current, and voltage. Okay, so it all starts with charge. Think of this as the absolute most basic building block of electricity. It's a property that tiny particles inside of every atom have, particles like electrons. You can just think of it as the raw stuff of electricity. So, what happens when these little charged particles, these electrons, start moving all together? Well, then you have a current. The best way to picture this is like water flowing through a pipe. The amount of water moving past a point every second, that's the current. In electricity, we measure that flow in amperes, or you've probably heard amps. Right. But what makes the water flow in the first place? You need pressure, right? And that's exactly what voltage is. It's the electrical pressure. It's the push that gets all those charges moving. Without voltage, the current just sits there and doesn't go anywhere. Now, here's a little mind bender for you, thanks to history. For decades, scientists thought electricity flowed from the positive side of the battery to the negative. So all our diagrams are still drawn that way. But we later discovered it's actually the negatively charged electrons that are moving. So the real flow is in the complete opposite direction. Kind of weird, right? For all the math, it doesn't really matter, but it's a super interesting piece of history.
Okay, so we've got our key players: charge, current, and voltage. Let's see how they all work together in the most straightforward type of electricity there is: direct current, or DC. That's where the electricity just flows in one steady direction.
So inside every circuit, there's this constant battle going on. You've got voltage, which is trying to push the current forward, but at the same time, a new player, resistance, is fighting back, trying to slow that flow down. And this fundamental relationship, this tug of war, is perfectly described by one of the most important rules in all of electronics, Ohm's law. It's the bedrock. Resistance is, well, it's pretty much what it sounds like. It resists the flow of current. You can think of it as electrical friction. And just like friction, it creates heat. That's exactly why your phone charger or your laptop brick gets warm when it's plugged in. Of course, circuits are rarely just one simple loop. They're usually more like a complicated city grid. And for that, you need traffic laws. That's where Kirchhoff's laws come in. The first one basically says that any electricity that flows into an intersection has to flow back out. It can't just disappear. And the second law says that if you make a round trip through any loop in the circuit, all the voltage pushes have to get used up by the components. These two rules let engineers map out even the most complex electronics. For a long time, DC was the only game in town, but it had one massive problem that made it totally impractical for powering our world. And the solution? Well, the solution was a revolution called alternating current, or AC. This gets us to the heart of the famous War of the Currents between Thomas Edison, who was all in on DC, and Nikola Tesla, who championed AC. See, the huge problem with DC is that it loses a ton of energy when you try to send it over long wires. AC, on the other hand, had this amazing trick up its sleeve. You could easily use a transformer to step up its voltage super high. And at high voltage, it could travel for hundreds of miles with almost no energy loss. That one ability is what made our modern power grid possible. So unlike DC's steady one-way street, AC is constantly doing this elegant dance. It flows forward, then smoothly reverses direction, back and forth, over and over again, perfectly tracing the path of a sine wave. And there are a few key ways we describe this wave. Frequency is just how fast it's switching back and forth. Here in North America, the electricity in your wall does that 60 times every second, so we call it 60 hertz. But since the voltage is always changing from a peak all the way down to zero and back up, how do we talk about it? Well, we use something called the RMS value. It's really just a practical way of saying what the effective power is. It gives us a single, stable number that's equivalent to a DC voltage. Okay, so we've got DC and AC. But how do we actually control these currents to build all the cool things we use? Well, engineers have a toolkit of fundamental parts, and it all starts with three passive components. First up is our old friend, the resistor. We've already met this guy. It's the most basic tool for just limiting the flow of current, kind of like a valve on a water pipe. Super important for making sure other parts of a circuit don't get too much electricity.
Next, we have the capacitor. You can think of this as a tiny little energy tank. It can store up a charge of electricity and then release it incredibly quickly. One of its neatest tricks is that it completely blocks steady DC current, but it lets the back and forth flow of AC pass right on through.
And rounding out our trio is the inductor. Its whole deal is that it hates change. It stores energy in a magnetic field, and it uses that field to fight against any sudden increase or decrease in current. It acts like a shock absorber, helping to keep the flow of electricity nice and smooth.
So there you have it, the three pillars. The resistor puts on the brakes, the capacitor stores energy for a quick burst, and the inductor keeps things smooth. Just by combining these three simple parts in different ways, engineers can build pretty much every electronic device you can imagine.
So after that whole big historical war of the currents, who actually won? Was it AC or DC? Well, the really cool answer is they both did. In fact, they work together in perfect harmony to power your life every single day. When it comes to getting power from a plant hundreds of miles away to the outlet in your wall, AC is the undisputed champion. There's just no better way to do it. It is the absolute king of the power grid. But here's the twist. All the delicate, sophisticated electronics inside your phone, your laptop, your TV, they can't handle the back and forth chaos of AC. They need that smooth, stable, predictable power that only DC can provide.
So that little power brick that you plug into the wall, it's a brilliant little translator. It's a bridge between these two worlds. It takes that high voltage AC from the grid and it carefully converts it into the safe, low voltage DC that your devices need to actually work. It's an essential job.
And this amazing system, this partnership born from a bitter rivalry, is still evolving. Think about it. Solar panels, batteries, what do they have in common? They are all naturally DC. So as we rely more and more on these technologies, it leaves us with a really fascinating question. After a century dominated by AC, are we about to enter a new age of DC?